Hi, this is Korean Choices in Criminology, a podcast describing the life stories of prominent scholars in criminology, created by Network Safe Places at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology. We would like to gain insights into their professional journeys, the factors and motivations behind their entry into the field of criminology, and their career accomplishments. We hope these interviews can serve as a source of inspiration for you who is a student or early career scholar. During these interviews, we aim to discover their past and present research passions. If you have comments or suggestions, please contact us via our website. Thank you and enjoy.
Hi, welcome to Careers and Choices in Criminology. My name is Vania Secato. I am a researcher at the KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, and we are here in San Francisco for the American Society of Criminology conference. With me here I have Professor Pamela Wilcox. She is a professor of sociology and criminology at the Pennsylvania State University. It is really a pleasure to have you here, Pamela, and we are very much looking forward to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be your guest.
Yes, I know, and I have been following your research. I know that you have been working with communities in crime, opportunities of crime, schools in particular, the kinds of things that you have done with schools, victimization, and also read that you are also working with threat of victimization, which is slightly different, and also other projects that I will go back later on. But before we start talking about research, I just would like that you would state your name and tell you about yourself a little bit.
Yes, thank you. I'm Pamela Wilcox, and I'm currently a professor at Penn State University, as you said, in the Department of Sociology and Criminology. I am also currently serving as the director of the graduate program in criminology at Penn State. So that's been an exciting aspect of my career recently. I started my educational career as an undergrad at Miami of Ohio. Graduated there in 1990 and then went on to get a master's and PhD in sociology at Duke University. And from there I started my career at University of Kentucky in the Department of Sociology, was there for 10 years. Then moved to the School of Criminal Justice at University of Cincinnati, was there for 10 years, and then in 2019 moved to Penn State.
Oh, I see. So there is a big of a zigzag going on.
Yeah. All of them were very, very wonderful places to work. So
So how did you decide to firstly, decided to go towards sociology, but also afterwards criminology, because obviously it's not exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. So how was the way that you took to...
Yeah, well, when I was in graduate school, most criminology programs were embedded within sociology departments. So there weren't very many PhD programs in criminology, criminal justice at the time. So my interest was always criminology, but it's just that early on those programs were housed within sociology departments. But in terms of how I started my interest in criminology, I guess that's a pretty complex story. It may take a while for me to answer, so I apologize for the long-windedness. But I started my undergraduate career at Miami of Ohio, like I said, as a chemistry major. So I had wonderful experiences in high school. I had 2 years of chemistry, calculus, and was very much into math and science, and had, like I said, terrific high school teachers in chemistry. And so I went off to undergrad thinking I would be a chemist. And was still a chemistry major for several years, and but at the same time was taking some of my social science requirements, and I had not had much social science exposure to social science in high school, and so it was new to me in college, and I just found myself much happier in those classes than my chemistry classes and physics classes and the things I was taking for my major. So yeah, had to do a lot of soul searching at that point, and I said, I think I'm going to change my major. I like, the social sciences, and in particular, I was very drawn to a program, and I consider myself very fortunate to have had this experience. In my undergrad program, within sociology, they offered this specialization in criminology, and the program was set up almost like a graduate program, but embedded within an undergraduate curriculum. So, for instance, any undergraduate at Miami could take a criminology class, and it would be your standard college class with 75, 100 students. But they had also this separate track where you could get a specialization, and you had to enter that track in your junior year, and you entered it as a cohort, and you took criminology classes only with the members of that cohort. It wasn't from students across the university. So I entered that program, and it really was like a graduate, cohort experience within undergraduate. And so my cohort in that criminology program was 8 people, just like I said, almost like a graduate cohort. We took all of our criminology classes together, and so we had criminology, juvenile delinquency, corrections. We did an internship, and it was a much more graduate-like experience at the undergraduate level. We were reading the classics instead of reading textbooks or learning from textbooks. We were reading the original works from Sean McKay and Hershey and Sykes and Matza and what have you. And so it was just such a great experience, and that really was how I got interested in criminology. Now that's then kind of the backdrop of all of that, though, is my mother. She was a sociologist, and she was not necessarily a criminologist, although she did teach classes. She was much more of a general sociologist. And one of the things she did as her role as a professor at Wilmington College was she offered classes at a men's prison in southwestern Ohio. And growing up as her daughter, I just saw how, passionate she was about what she was doing, and how rehabilitative she felt like the education within prison was for the people, her students, in that setting. And it was just, I admired that so much, and I thought it was very interesting how she was changing lives, she and her colleagues who were providing.
It was a model for you,
yes,
right?
Yes. So
lovely to have that around you as a reference, right?
Yes.
Did you have any teachers that also sparkled the interest? I mean, there is always some that make the difference, right?
Right, yeah, and so I think it would be the director of that program that I was explaining in my undergraduate, and his name was Dr. Robert Sherwin, and just I think that program was his idea, and it's a fantastic idea, to have this sort of special track within a larger criminology program that are for students who really want to immerse themselves in criminology specifically. So I haven't run across anyone who's gone through an undergraduate program in criminology like that, and it was just very, very inspiring. And
so is the program that is still the same way, or?
I don't think it is. He retired, and I'm not sure that it was, it was maintained to the same level that it was. I may be wrong.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I haven't stayed in touch with many people as much as I probably should. But my sense is that it went away, at least temporarily. I hope that it was, it came back in some way, shape, or form, because it really was transformative.
But even within criminology, you have a wide, number of subjects. So how did you end up working more towards communities in crime and these kinds of things that normally we enjoyed, place management. How did you?
Yeah, great question, because when I left undergrad, that program, I felt like I would probably focus on corrections as my area of specialization, but then in graduate school, a very inspirational mentor to me was Ken Land, and so he was my dissertation advisor and really pointed me or directed me to an important area, which was integrating routine activities or the opportunity perspective with the social disorganization perspective, so looking at opportunities within community contexts. And so that sort of set the stage for really the rest of my career. I loved that perspective, and I used it for my dissertation, and have kind of continued to use that overall framework throughout. So I'm very grateful for his guidance as well.
I have seen in your CV that you mentioned that you are working with a project in rural Pennsylvania. If you can tell a little bit about that too, because most of your work is more urban, right? Urban based.
Yeah, it's. I would say my community work spans the rural-urban continuum.
Okay.
And so, the dissertation I just mentioned that sort of set the stage for my career was based on data from Seattle neighborhoods, so very urban, you're right. Yeah. And that was really for, I'd say, the first 10 years of my career. I was analyzing those data, which were collected by Terry Meathy, but again, very urban-based. When I was at University of Kentucky, though, I should mention another very inspirational mentor in my career was Dr. Dick Clayton, who was a colleague of mine at University of Kentucky, and he and I were investigators. He was the principal investigator, and I was the co-investigator on a longitudinal data collection effort in Kentucky schools. And we called it the Rural Substance Abuse and Violence Project, but really the schools across Kentucky span the rural-urban continuum. I mean, Kentucky's a very rural state, so we had many rural schools, but we also had schools from Lexington and Louisville that are urban, and so it really was the continuum. So that project, yielded 4 years of longitudinal data from adolescents in schools across the rural-urban continuum, and I spent probably 20 years of my career since that data collection effort analyzing the many studies that were sort of embedded in there. And then, yes, most recently I've kind of come back to that rural focus, and with a project I'm just starting in Pennsylvania, as you said. It's really in the pilot testing phase, so it's very new, but we are focusing on, it's a multifaceted project. On the one hand, we're focused on the experiences of probation clients in rural communities, how they interact with their community corrections probation or parole officer, the different styles of interaction there, and how that changes on a case-by-case basis and a county-by-county basis. I'm a real believer in rural heterogeneity, and that rural is not a monolith, and that we need to understand within rural differences, and so hopefully we will expand to all 23 rural counties in Pennsylvania. That's going to take several years, but that's the overall goal. The other side of it is that we're also studying the officers in those rural probation and parole settings, and it's part an occupational study to get at occupational satisfaction and stress related to community supervision in rural communities. And again, part service provision and the different styles of service provision, the different focal concerns of officers in these rural communities.
You work with, I never actually saw this, concept, the threat of victimization. If you can tell a little bit more about it. what do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's been another very, something very dear to my heart in terms of my own research. And so on the one hand, we experience, or I've studied the actual experience of victimization. So people being a victim of crime and the different, both individual and contextual risk factors associated with that. But there's also this experience with victimization that is more subjective. And so, and I think the subjective dimension is what I'm referring to with that threat of victimization. So it's not our actual experiences, but our ideas about the threat, the possible threat out there. And then I see that as being divided into several different dimensions. So on the one hand, there's the cognitive dimension, kind of our perception of becoming a victim, our chances, the likelihood that we're going to be a victim, and then the more emotional dimension of that, our anxiety or worry about becoming a victim. And so that's often termed fear of crime in the criminology literature. So there's this perceived risk and fear of crime. And I did some early work on that, coming from the dissertation data that I talked about, and then did some other things with the school study in Kentucky. But I'm coming back to that threat of victimization. Recently collected some survey data, contracting through YouGov, and we have information on victimization experiences and the threat of victimization in both offline and online settings. From 1,500 respondents across the country, and
amazing.
Thank you.
Big database, right? I'm wondering a little bit about your work as a teacher. You have quite many students, I imagine, or?
Yes. Teaching is wonderful. I love it. I love teaching at the undergraduate level, the graduate level. It is such a rewarding part of my career. So I've been teaching for 31 years now. Each year the size of my classes vary a great deal. They can be 30 undergraduate students or 300 undergraduate students. Different universities and different departments kind of have a different setup for those sorts of things. So I've had a lot of different kind of undergraduate teaching experiences. The graduate level, I love teaching the seminars, but I really enjoy, advising graduate students, directing their theses and dissertations, and I'm very proud to have chaired, I think now 21 PhD students.
Oh
my. And they've all gone on to just do really great things, and it's really, really rewarding.
Yeah. And you have a long experience on this. Do you think that it changed? The students has changed, or I don't know if you have reflect upon that. I haven't done myself, so I'm just trying to toss the question. And
I don't really think they've changed in terms of like work ethic or motivation or skills or anything like that. I definitely see changing interests, with graduate students, and that's to be expected as, the world changes. And therefore the sorts of research questions that I think students come into graduate school really eager to address, of course, is going to change based upon what's happening in the world. So I've definitely seen shifts in terms of kind of hot topics, if you will, but I've been, it's wonderful students throughout my career, and very blessed.
I'm just wondering a little bit about your experience also, looking back, what do you think that you would say basically to motivate young people that, or maybe young scholars that are starting their career now, based on your experience? Is there something that is there a recipe to get it right, or how was your experience as a a woman starting career and in criminology?
Yeah, goodness, that's
a difficult one.
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult question, but it's a good one. I think, obviously it depends what direction someone would want to go. Is it fully research? Is it teaching? Is it both? For research, I would say there is no recipe, and that's the good news. As don't try to find the recipe for success. Instead, seize upon opportunities that are there and chart your course accordingly, because the opportunities that present themselves are of course going to be different for everybody. And so I would have never really imagined necessarily becoming a community criminologist, but that opportunity was presented through, a seminar that I did with my advisor, and it really, stuck with me, and I became very passionate about it. But I couldn't have foreseen that, like I said, I entered graduate school thinking I would specialize in corrections, and so yeah, allow things to unfold as the opportunities present themselves. Be open to working with people who are, very rigorous, don't have confidence. I think that's a really big one, is believe that you can do it, have confidence in yourself. Don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. I think if I were looking back at myself, 20, 30 years ago, I would say just, get outside your comfort zone. Don't be afraid. You can do this, and have more confidence. So I think
it is a little bit about, having ideas and questions that probably you want to answer, right? Even if it is a little bit outside of your zone, comfort zone. I mean, and trying to push yourself towards things that you want probably to solve. In this case, for instance, research. If I understood correctly, you have also quite a lot of what you do has a big relevance for society. Tell me a little bit about these connections between academia and community, as you mentioned. I mean, stakeholders that you normally have contacts with, that is part of, for instance, your research.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd answer that question in a couple of ways. And one, I think some of the research I've done involves direct contact with practitioners and community agencies that can sort of immediately change should they want to. So for instance, the probation project I'm working on currently in rural Pennsylvania, we are very much partnering with these probation departments in rural communities, and they will get reports of the data, and they may implement changes as the chief probation officer sees fit, almost immediately. So and same thing with the school-based research in Kentucky. We had to partner, of course, with the school superintendents and principals throughout all of that data collection, and we provided reports, school-specific reports to them, and those principals did make some changes, for instance, to the layout of the school or what have you, to improve the safety of students in the schools. Some didn't, but some did, So there's that's one part of my answer. But the other part, I would say, is that I wouldn't classify myself at all as an applied researcher. I'm more of a sort of basic science or theory testing, researcher. And I would, this is another piece of advice I guess I would give to people getting started, because I think it can be easy when you are the theory testing kind of researcher to lose sight of the relevance of your research, because it is more removed from the implementation, the practice. And I can remember earlier in my career sometimes thinking, what is this test of routine activities theory or social disorganization theory, doing to affect the world, and it's not, and I would get very discouraged. But then, I think it's important to really keep in mind the perspective that, those of us who do the theory testing, while it may not have an immediate impact, it is. It's just, because of course policy should be based on theory and sound theory and theory that's been tested. And so that, that good policy needs good theoretical work as well to support it. And it's okay to be doing that part of, the theory testing as well, even if it's not like immediately tied to the practice or policy. But that took a while for me to, I admit early in my career, I sometimes felt, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but just frustrated that maybe, the work I was doing wasn't as impactful or meaningful as I would have liked. But I had a lot of, again, good mentors and colleagues who said, it's fine to be a theory tester. We need that too. We need that to serve as the foundation for the practitioners. So.
And I guess nowadays is part of many programs, that this contact with society is already there. Mm-hmm. But I guess maybe 30 years ago, it was not part, of the education. But right. Today is.
Yeah, much more.
Which
yes.
makes, I think, more easier for students to create that link. At least I can say from our own education. Mm-hmm. Which makes a natural, move from the theory, even if you are, the one that is interested in hypothesis testing and theory testing. Mm-hmm. And I guess there are also quite a lot of these interactions that between, society and us, to what extent the way that they behave and would also affect the way we reformulate perhaps hypotheses and so on. So it's again these kinds of interactions that goes a little bit in both ways, and it can be demanding too, right? Because it takes energy to make contact and so on, right?
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, it's very rewarding when that happens, but I agree with you. It's I think the field has changed a lot in the last 30 years in that regard, and that would be, getting back to one of your earlier questions about changes in students. And I didn't think about that until you just said that, but that is one I think I have seen, is that real interest in having the community-based research, community impact right away, and we do have more abilities to do that. I mean, I think programs are just set up more today than they were certainly when I was in graduate school to have that as a component of the training, and I have definitely seen that. So
So we were talking about the past, but how do you think that the field will unravel? And you can define the field in a way you want. How do you think that things will develop for the future? What is going to be on 20 years perhaps? Our field, criminology, or within environmental criminology and
this is another hard question. I don't see myself as particularly visionary, but I will. I do think that the rural component that we've talked about a bit today is going to continue to grow. I think that's one of the directions I see community criminology anyway, that's going to be a growth area, because it has to be. In many ways, we've ignored rural communities within the communities in place area in criminology. And even if we haven't ignored it, it's definitely still taken a backseat to urban-focused research. And there's just, at least in the United States context, the rural communities are clearly hurting and need attention as well, and they have different needs and potentially different solutions than urban communities. And so I do see that as a real area of growth. In the book I published with Frank Cullen and Ben Feldmeyer on communities in crime, it was published in 2018, and the last chapter had a looking forward, and it had 4 ideas, and one of them that I really felt quite strongly about was the moving away from just this overwhelming urban focus and really looking at rural areas, suburban areas as well, recognizing different community structures and what have you, so that, not all cities are developed in the concentric zone model that, Sean McKay's social disorganization theory was built upon. And so we have to think differently maybe about cities like LA that were, set up very differently. And then, of course, rural communities, which are very different as well. So, just coming out of the opioid epidemic in the United States, which the rural communities were very, hit very heavily with. And I just think that it's going to be a growth area for sure. So that is one way I'll answer the question.
Yes. Do you think that criminology is going to be more and more interdisciplinary than it is today? Because criminology is read at this, at the core, quite interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
Do you think that it will tend to be more interdisciplinary? New fields will be part of what we today call criminology.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I'm not. We already are, like you said.
Yeah.
So I think that trend will continue. I think it's too interesting to the new generation of students coming in. They like the interdisciplinary focus. I also see big data, a lot of students coming in with big data interests and computational analysis, interesting computational analysis that exceed anything that I experienced in graduate school. So we're, scraping data from Twitter accounts and what have you that was not even on the radar, right? And when I was in 1990, but this is all possible now, and the, younger generation of criminologists are quite interested in it. And so I see that as definitely an area. And of course that brings in computer science and,
That's
all
right.
kinds of fields that we have heretofore not really seen as part of criminology. So yeah, I do think that interdisciplinary focus is going to continue and go in different directions, and those are just a few of the directions I see right now, but who knows, right? We don't know, because it's all based on the changes that happen in our world, and I'm not sure what those are going to be.
No, and it also depends on where the money is, right?
Yes,
Funding,
yeah.
We are very much depending on particular agendas, regardless of whether we are in Sweden or I guess in the US or Brazil, we end up quite dependent on the kinds of sources and the agendas that the states or it is better now than it was in the past for women in general in the field. What do you think in the US context?
Yeah, I certainly do. You just look around at ASC. When I first started coming to ASC in 1992, there were, it was like 10% women. I don't know. That's a ballpark, but it was just completely dominated by men. And go around today, it's, I think, majority women, and it's so much more international than it was in 92. And that was my first ASC conference, is 1992. So I've seen the field just become so much more diverse in so many ways, gender one of those, but and so that's really exciting. The ASC looks very, very different and in an exciting, diverse way than it did in the early 90s.
Yeah, just as an example,
Yeah.
we are from abroad.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
My first was in 2004, and I can tell about this shift that it has become more international and more plural in so many ways.
Yes.
I think we are approaching to an end, and I'm just wondering if there is anything that you want to add that I didn't ask, and you want to, is there anything that you want to say that I haven't?
I don't don't think so. I mean, I think it's been a pleasure to have a conversation with you, and I encourage anyone who's interested in research criminology. It's a wonderful field, full of wonderful people, and it has the ability to really improve our world, the research that we do. So I can't, I feel very fortunate to have been in this field for 30 years, and I wouldn't change a thing. So
lovely, thank you. It's lots of words of encouragement, and for us and for those that will be listening us. This is all from me, and thank you so much, Pamela, for taking time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon. And from me, goodbye.